master's degree here with Jeske, and is nearly completed with a PhD that she's on schedule to finish in spring, also with Jeske. So that'll be great. But she's going to tell us a whole bunch about the UWM-ARL collections and the work that's been going into we welcome her, and thank you so much.
I told him it was okay to mention I'm trying to graduate in the spring, so you can all guilt me into it every time you see me. You're like, how much did you get done today? Unless I look really hassled, and then don't talk to me about it. So I guess what I want to do today, this has really been, being collections manager has been an eye-opening experience for me. I've been at UW-Milwaukee for 8 years now, and I don't think until the last year or so as collections manager that I really have any idea of what we have here, how it's accumulated, and what we can do with it. So I'd really like to make that information available to you guys, and so you can make it available to other people and sort of spread the word about what we have here and what we're doing with it. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So what do we have here is a good starting place, I guess. You'll notice that there are a lot of over and approximately things here. That would be because I don't exactly know the exact numbers for all of these things, but I've got a pretty good idea at this point. So I know that we have over 3,000 boxes just of artifacts, specifically artifacts. That's not counting the over 2,500 sets of human remains that we house here. So that's mostly what you find in our collection storage, both here in the building and outside of the building. We've got collections from more than 1,400 archaeological sites, both in the state, out of the country, so they're from all over the place. We've got over, this one I actually am pretty confident on the number, 480 linear feet of archives, something that we just figured out in the last year or so. Maps from over 150 archaeological projects, again from all over the country and the world, and approximately 1,200 reports of investigations. Now that's just published both by UW-Milwaukee and by Great Lakes Archaeological Research Center, who's now a part of UW-Milwaukee. So we've also got a lot of other stuff that's not our own reports of investigations that we curate here. So that's a lot of stuff to deal with. Where did it all come from? So a lot of it's come from cultural resource management. There's been a couple different phases that cultural resource management at UWM has gone through, a couple different names. It started out as the UWM-ARL is what they were calling themselves, which is just the UW-Milwaukee Archaeological Research Laboratory, is the auspices that they operated under from 1973 to 97. Then in 1997, the name changed to Historic Resource Management Services, or HRMES, and we operated as that through 2014 when we had the merger with Great Lakes, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And now we call ourselves UW-Milwaukee Cultural Resource Management, or UWM-CRM, just keeping it very simple now, no strange acronyms. So originally projects started out as large-scale surveys, and then we see more of these surveys continuing through 2000s. We've got a lot of mitigation projects, both historic and prehistoric, and then we've got a lot of utility work that's now over 500 projects per year that we're dealing with. So there's a lot of material just coming from cultural resource management. In addition to that, the ARL has always had field schools. So I just listed a few of the field schools that have been run by UWM. This certainly isn't all of them. Some of them have been fairly local, other ones have not been local. There have been a lot of smaller field projects outside the country, but never really under the auspices of an official field school. But we have had field schools like the Fort Ross Historic Park in California that's not local, but it was a rather large group of students. So that generates a pretty large amount of material coming in from those field schools as well. So who's generating all this stuff? I've got some faces here from some of the big names that have generated a lot of our collections. Robert Howard was really started the department in '57. And then some of the big names following him, we hired Melvin Fowler in 1966. Poor William McHugh doesn't have a face because I could not find one to save my life, but we do still have plenty of his archives here. Then we had both Benchley and Lynn Goldstein were hired in 1975. And then maybe some of the people that you guys are more familiar with, like Bob Jeske, Pat and John Richards, Brian Nichols, Bettina Arnold, all came on board in the 1990s. So these are all the people who generated this material that we have here. Some of their material they took with them when they went to other institutions. Some of their material went to be curated at other institutions when they passed away. And some of them just left a lot of it here. So we've got things in a lot of different places from a lot of different stages of people's careers. So in addition to the changing face of the professors at UWM, we've also always had a program assistant. I shouldn't say always, but for a long time we've had a program assistant. And what that has consisted of is the collections manager position. And it's similar to a TA-ship funding-wise, where it covers your tuition, provides benefits, and you get 20 hours a week of work. So you can see here, if you look at the dates, so I've got some of us listed, that's me up at the top, and then going back to Jody Clowder, and then I skipped a few years so I could get you guys some more memorable names, where I've got people that a lot of us know from working in CRM, Rob Watson, Scott DeMel is now at Northern Michigan, Blaine Nansel, Kathy Bird, and of course our own John Richards was a PhD student and was collections manager from 1988 to 1990. So he's just inflicting upon me what he went through as a collections manager. So as you can see, these are almost entirely 2-year ranges, and that's how the collections manager or program assistant position works, is that every 2 years you transition to a new collections manager. So that brings in a lot of new ideas, but it also brings in a lot of confusion because there's no transition period. It's a 9-month position, and so you trade off jobs. Someone ends their position at the beginning of the summer, and some new sucker picks it up in the fall and has no idea what's happened in the intervening time. So if you're lucky, the person who was there before you is still around and can, answer your questions. If you're not lucky, they're in another state, no one can reach them. So this has created some issues, and we've tried over the past couple generations of collections managers to mitigate those issues that come between the generational gaps there. So ongoing with the history of the ARL, program assistants have long been a part of it since before the ARL was located in this building. So there have been 2 main building locations for the ARL and its history. The first one was in the Kenilworth building, which many of you might know now. It's student housing. They've got a couple other things located in that building now. It's located south of here on the Lower East Side on Farwell. And we still have the original blueprints from that building when they first put the ARL in there. So we can see where they had everything organized. And they had some of the classic problems that all archaeologists seem to have: flooding. I found these pictures when I was going through the archives from the Great Flood of September 8th, 1993, when the entire lab was, as you can see, the underwater archaeology research laboratory. Someone must have thought that was pretty funny. So Kenilworth in general, everyone who was working there at the time will tell you, was not a great place to be located. And so when they had the opportunity to relocate to somewhere on campus with better facilities and redesign the building in the way that they wanted, sort of in the way that they wanted, they jumped at it. So we moved to Sabin Hall in 1997. And that was initially just a few of the faculty members had just started in the preceding years, and so they were all just starting on this project at the same time. So from the outside, it looks a lot better. Initially, we were supposed to get, as a department, all 3 floors. That didn't work out. Outrage, I know. Initially, so we ended up with just 2 floors of lab and classroom space. And it's only been in the last year or so that we've gotten access to the 3rd floor, which has really expanded our facilities a lot. However, the move did not prevent the flooding problems, which is something that just seems to be pervasive in archaeological storage, no matter where you locate yourself. 2010, we had a huge flood in our collection storage here in Sabin Hall. Some of you were probably here helping evacuate artifacts during that flood. But silver lining, that's how we got a lot of our compact shelving, was when they had to gut that storage area, so they're not all bad. The other floods have not been at all good. So in 2016, our auxiliary collection storage area in the Northwest Quad over here flooded in December, I think. And then in middle of winter in 2017, we also had a flood here in Sabin again. So it just is an ongoing thing that we are dealing with. But in other ways, there have been a lot of steps forward moving to Sabin Hall. So one of the things that I mentioned with that 2010 flood is that it gave us the opportunity to really upgrade our curation facilities. Up until that point, we had just had stationary shelving. We had some compact shelving that we were looking at putting in anyway, but since we were going to have to deal with redoing the entire curation facility, we managed to get L&S to throw down the money for the rest of this compact shelving. So we still have the blueprints from that. Initially, the plan was to have something similar to what the MPM has. Many of you have seen the MPM storage facilities. We have a lot of their wooden drawers here, but we were looking for something with metal drawers. A lot of curation facilities have these. This is what the Glenn Black Lab uses, the Logan Museum. So this is pretty common, and you have these metal drawers that you pull out, and they're located in compact shelving, which is great. You get lots of drawers. They also cost twice as much money. So that idea got nixed, and we didn't end up with the drawers. And instead, we have all these shelves that we can put banker-sized boxes on, which is what we usually store most of our artifacts in to begin with. So once that was going, at least we had a place to put our boxes. One really huge step that we've made in bridging the gap between generations and collections managers is starting to use standardized museum software. So previously, until Brooke Drew was collections manager in 2011, we had been switching methods of cataloging things every time we switched collections managers, where some people were doing it by paper, sometimes you had Excel sheets, sometimes you had access databases, and then you had all these different systems of cataloging things, and no one could keep track of what the previous person had done. Now, granted, I still have some trouble keeping track of what the previous person had done, but at least it's all in one spot so I can find it. So Past Perfect has a lot of advantages in that it's a multi-catalog database. So you can see over here on the left, this is the screen from when you first open up Past Perfect here. You've got an object catalog, photo catalog, archives, and library. So we can log all of our materials, whether they be artifacts, reports, books, or project photos or paperwork that can all go into the database, so it's all trackable, and we can reunite the archives and the objects from a particular collection. We've also got a sites and localities database where we're able to log all of the sites that we have collections from. So if you just want to look at material from a particular site, then you can look it up that way. So it really offers a lot of advantages that other databases might not have offered to us. Now, granted, it is set up for a museum, which we are not. We're an archaeological repository, and so there are some clashes sometimes in what we want to use Past Perfect for and what it was originally set up for. So we're constantly trying to retrofit Past Perfect for what we want it to do. But it at least gives us a standardized way to digitally track things. So after Past Perfect, quickly after the addition of Past Perfect, we had to expand our storage facilities. So we already had this nice basement storage facility. All of a sudden, it wasn't big enough anymore. We had large projects bringing in those thousands of human remains that I was talking about. And then the merger with the other CRM company, Great Lakes Archaeological Research Center, meant that we had hundreds more boxes that we now had to curate and know where to put them in our current storage facilities. Fortunately for us, they had just decided to use the Northwest Quad, which, if you don't know, is in the abandoned St. Mary's Hospital, as storage. It's creepy, and it's in the basement of an abandoned hospital. But it works. So we have all the collections up off the floor. We have a place to put them that no one's going to bother them because no one knows it's there. And we've got a secure facility there, at least. It is not what I would call federally compliant, though. I would be worried about telling you that, except every single archaeological repository is in the exact same position. Everyone has, if they're lucky, has one compliant facility and one that is completely not. So this is really the situation that we all find ourselves in what we call the curation crisis, where we just have all this stuff and we don't know what to do about it and we don't have the staff to deal with it. So the Northwest Quad really exemplifies that, as you can see. So I've been talking a lot about this, and this really is a significant part of what has caused the current state of the curation crisis here at UWM. So in 2014, the CRM company here absorbed Great Lakes Archaeological Research Center, and a lot of their staff came here, and so did all of their collections. That includes all of their reports, all of their documentation, all of their artifacts, all of their flotation samples that had yet to be processed. All of that stuff came here. Thanks, guys. No. So what happened was we had all of these boxes. Now, the amazing thing is they were much better cataloged than the ones that were here, because at least you had a standardized system. Here at the ARL, you've got multiple different professors bringing in collections from a lot of different projects, and they're all using different systems to catalog them. So that's often this problem that you find in a university setting, is this proprietary use of collections by the professors that collect those items, and then they don't really have a unified system for dealing with those collections. With one CRM firm, at least, we had a unified numbering system, and everybody had a pretty good idea of what there was and what it went with. Now, of course, we messed all of that up as soon as we brought it over here and tried to integrate it with our current system. So we've been sort of backtracking ever since to try and figure out. We had been curating a number of GLARC collections before the merger, so we had to go back and figure out which ones we had had before, which ones we didn't get till after, and why it mattered, and if we had them in our system or not. So this happened in 2014, and we've just been sort of reeling ever since, trying to deal with that backlog. We had a backlog of UWM collections before that, and then this just sort of piled it on. But we're digging ourselves out at this point. One of the ways that we've been able to do this is by having interns working with the collections manager. So this really started with just a single undergraduate research student that Brooke had working for her, and then Alexis Jordan expanded that program to bring in some volunteers. She had half a dozen volunteers working with her, and now we're up to 20 interns this semester, both people interning for credit, people doing their museum studies internships, and a lot of volunteers, people who are volunteering their time to come in, go through archives, clean out silt traps, you know, what have you. And I've been very impressed so far. So last year I had 12 interns in the fall and 8 in the spring. And this fall I've started out with 20, which is a little overwhelming. But I've been very impressed with their tenacity and how well they have picked up these new tasks very quickly. So without that, I cannot imagine how little would have been done. So having that extra workforce, when the only position that UWM is able to pay to deal with the collections is a 20-hour-a-week collections manager position, means that we're able to deal with this backlog a lot better than many other institutions are able to. So shout out to the interns. This is really something that has taken off, and I hope will continue to take off, because we got plenty of work to do. So, and we're making excellent progress with it. One of the things that really has been significant in my tenure as collections manager is the addition of the third floor to the anthropology facilities. So we added a few different things on the third floor. There were already cultural anthropology offices, and then we added a zooarchaeology lab here, and then this yellow area was just sort of left. There's a museum studies area here, and then this highlighted area was just sort of left vacant. There were a bunch of, what is this called? I'm struggling here. Cubicles, thank you. Left in there from when university relations were there earlier. And so the space was open, but nobody really had any plans for anything to do with it. And I thought it would be nice to get rid of some papers. So we have a lot of things that are made of paper and really didn't have any unified way to deal with them. So this became our archives facility. And it just sort of grew incrementally beyond what I expected it to do. And we got more and more space up there, and we have filled it all. In fact, it's overflowing already. So archaeologists generate a lot of paper. But the third floor made all of that possible. Before the third floor, all of our archives were in boxes. Many of them were in artifact storage. The rest of them were just sort of stuffed in closets, places, and we didn't know what we had or where it was. So if a researcher wanted to access those materials, we had several requests for materials from Cahokia, from Melvin Fowler's Cahokia excavations. We couldn't find anything. And we just didn't have a place to put them, right? Everyone's got those possessions that pile up in your home and you just don't have enough storage space. We had that on a macro scale here. Third floor let us deal with some of that. So, you know, this has been a lot of good history. Well, what have you done for me lately? We've established the archive facilities. So the things that I have in yellow up there are things that are ongoing. White is pseudo-finished. So the archive facilities are really set up and going now at this point where people can go up there and find things, which is amazing. We've been accessioning all of our boxes of artifacts into Past Perfect. Everything in our ground level storage facility here is now in Past Perfect. I really mean it this time. I'm pretty sure, 99.9% sure that it's all in there this time. So I really think so. Then the other thing that we're doing is adding all of the Northwest Quad collections. A lot of that was previously accessioned, it turns out, just no one wrote the object ID numbers on the boxes, so we didn't know they were accessioned. And now we just have to go back and match up the boxes with the records that we created for them. So it's only half as much work as we would have to do otherwise. So that's ongoing. I've got somebody working on that this semester, which is very exciting. It's a little isolating. She just goes over there with a laptop and works alone in a deserted hospital all day. So if you see Hannah Patton around, try and talk to her, because she doesn't get a lot of human interaction. But it's really something that needs to be done. I'm very glad that she's taking it on. Rehousing the human remains. The crew that works with the Milwaukee County Poor Farm Cemetery remains does a fantastic job of dealing with those collections. But we've also got several sets of human remains that are not from that collection, that are from sites all over the state. And some of those have been in our collections for quite some time and have never been rehoused. They're in plastic bags, they're in no bags. So that's something that we're dealing with, is getting them all in glassine bags, getting them labeled, getting them in polypropylene boxes, so that they're stored the same way that the rest of our human remains collections are. Rehousing of legacy collections. Legacy collections is pretty much everything we've got. So we've got some recent CRM projects, certainly, but we have a lot of large collections from professors that were here previously or from old CRM projects that need to be rehoused. Some of them have artifacts that haven't been washed, that the boxes are falling apart. I see from previous generations of Alexis's interns, sometimes there are sticky notes on the boxes downstairs that say, mouse damage, or too heavy, could be split into 2 boxes. So we're working on dealing with those things and finding a better way of tracking them than Post-it notes. So rehousing those is a big project. Floatation is a big project. I'll show some pictures explaining why later, but that we're actually making some headway on this semester. Organization of reports, I'll talk about a little bit more in a second, but that's really been some big progress there, that we've been able to get those organized and accessible. Organizing the reference library, very much in progress, and I'll show some more pictures of that later. Developing a barcode system where we're able to track our boxes in a more efficient way, and digitizing our records. So those are some things that we've been focusing on. So I want to give a couple case studies of what we've done in the last couple years. And I'll talk first about the archives, because that's been our big major project in the last year or so. So the first thing, we dealt with a lot of different categories of material with our paper archives. And one of them is the reports of investigations. So we had not only several sets of reports of investigations from both GLARC and the ARL, but we also had lots of duplicates. Sometimes we'd have 40 copies of one report and 0 copies of another report. And we just had hundreds of boxes of reports laying around, and that was taking up a lot of space that we could be using for collections. So I wanted to get rid of any duplicates that we weren't going to use. Dr. Richards was not comfortable just throwing them out, so we organized a giveaway, and we gave away more than 2,000 copies of reports to avocational archaeologists, to students, to archaeological associations, to universities that wanted a set for their archives, and we were able to clear out pretty much all of that surplus rather than throwing those out. So kudos to Dr. John for not letting me throw them out. Sometimes that is a good idea. So we actually were able to put them to a much better use. Then in addition to that, we kept a single shelf copy of each of the reports, which you can see here on the shelves, hence the shelf copy. And then we also kept a backup copy of the bound report, which those are all filed in the filing cabinets over here. And then we also kept one of the master copies from when the reports were originally printed. Those are also filed in the cabinets, and we're working on digitizing them so that we have digital copies of all of the reports. You'll kind of see in the background over here, there's a shelf of other reports there that I didn't talk about. Those are all the non-UWM reports, and Kevin Aikman has been working very diligently on those for quite some time now, and is organizing them by state and then by author last name. And so those, and in addition, is creating a database of them, so that'll be searchable, and the gray literature might not be so gray anymore then. People might actually be able to utilize that. So we have a very large collection of non-UWM unpublished reports, and that's where a lot of the archaeological information about the region comes from, but it's not really accessible to researchers, so that's something we want to do, is make that an accessible resource for people. So the next category of material we had to deal with was curation documentation, and that consisted of a lot of different categories of material. We have incoming loan forms, outgoing loan forms, curation agreements where we agreed to curate materials for a particular institution, deeds of gift where we agreed to take these gifts from another institution or an individual, transfers or deaccessions where we transferred material to another institution or we deaccessioned it, if it turned out to be a bunch of rough rock or something like that. Collections access requests, so anytime someone wants to utilize the collections here that's from another institution, they have to fill out a collections access request. A bunch of correspondence that ranges anywhere from transmittal forms from other institutions. We've got this DOI report on an inspection here in 1986. And then we've just got correspondence between faculty regarding curating materials from a particular CRM firm. So we've got a lot of miscellaneous correspondence to curate. Old inventories form a large amount of our paper archives, and building documentation, which I showed you guys a lot of earlier. So that is all housed in the collections manager's office, and we're working on digitizing all of that so that it's on the server as well as filed in a findable format in the office. So curation documentation has been a relatively small part, but it's a pretty diverse part of the archive, so it's required some time to deal with. The probably biggest difference that I can say that we made in the storage of our archives is in the map library. So before, our map library looked something like this. You had this tiny room with maps stacked as high as they could possibly be stacked so that no one could really reach them. And they're just sort of stacked in a haphazard fashion. Sometimes they were labeled in ways that made sense and ways that didn't make sense, and not at all. So sometimes the labels had fallen off, so we didn't really have any idea what they were. They were in bags, just kind of stuffed in the corners, rolled up. And this is what the room looked like. So those bags that are laying all over the place now used to all be stuffed up here on top of these shelves. So those at least had been taken down. I would like to say that it looked neater before she took the bags down, but that would be a lie. So the bags coming down, it really doesn't change the way the room looked. So as you can guess, no one really used the maps because no one could get to the maps, and for fear of their life, for fear of something falling on them. And not to mention the drawers were too high for anyone to ever peer over them to see what was in there. So it wasn't really a particularly useful facility per se. This is what it looks like now. So this is in the main archives room, and we've got all of those map cabinets here. Those are all of our flat maps, and then all of these filing cabinets are filled with those rolled maps. So any rolled maps that would fit in the lateral filing cabinets went in there. And our map collection consists of 33 drawers of rolled maps, 91 drawers of flat maps, 4 drawers of folded maps. I know the archives people tell me it's not good to fold them. We're working on that. But they were folded when I got them. I didn't fold them. So we'll try and see what we can salvage. Unfolding them is perhaps more dangerous than leaving them folded at this point. So that's on the to-do list project. And 100 oversized rolled maps, which created a problem for us because they wouldn't fit in my nice rolled map drawers. So we managed to get some cardboard boxes that have those dividers in there, and we didn't go with poster tubes for all of them. That was a little above our price limit, but everything's wrapped in brown paper now, so it doesn't have to worry about sun damage, and we've got labels with accession numbers on all of the rolled maps, so they're now all in Past Perfect. So things are a little more systematic now, at least. Kudos to Madison Houghton, who is the intern that did all of that. That was her 150-hour internship that she did for museum studies, and created a digital master list of all the maps and where they're located. So that was a big win for us to be able to make things look nice and workable. So in addition to all those maps, we've also got all the other papers, and the large amount of these papers are CRM projects. So the archives facility is composed of 3 rooms. We've got this main room here, which these are the rolled map drawers, and then the flat map cabinets back there. The main door to the room is right here, and then you've got 2 doors to side rooms over here. The first room is this main CRM projects room. That's where we have sequentially numbered first all of the UWM projects, and then all of the GLARC projects that are less than 1 drawer capacity for the materials for a particular collection. If a particular project takes up more than 1 drawer's worth of material, and we do have plenty of those, then it goes in the smaller room, and that's for the large CRM projects. So those 2 rooms are completely CRM related. they are full. So you guys can't do any more work, sorry. So we're going to work on reorganizing those. A lot of them contain rolled materials and folded materials that can significantly be downsized, and materials in binders that, if they're properly stored, will really change the storage capacity. So we've got a lot of work to do there, but they are all in numerical order, all labeled, all accessible to anyone who's looking for them. And then the larger room has got all of these drawers, and there's a few more on this side wall here, and that's for academic projects, site files, and personal archives of the faculty here. Some of the photos in this PowerPoint are really huge, so I wouldn't be surprised if it stops working. Okay. So the non-CRM archives then don't compose, they compose maybe not even a third of the paper archives that we have, but there's a lot of variety in what we find, and they're a lot less systematic, so it requires a lot more time to deal with them. So they consist of anything ranging from all of the original paper Southeast Wisconsin site files are located here. So those are all stored in binders here. All of the Northeast Illinois site files are also stored here. We've got collector files, which means that we have files on many of the local collectors. Most of those records were generated in the 1980s and 90s. So we don't have anything much later than that, but we still have documentation of a lot of private collections that I actually had somebody reference not that long ago. Someone came in from elsewhere in the state working on a compliance project and needed the original collector documents, and what do you know, we had them. What do you know, I almost managed to find them pretty easily. So that was a big win. So collector files are a pretty neat resource that we have here. The Cahokia Archives from Fowler, I'll highlight a little bit more later, but it consists of anything ranging from photographs to radiocarbon dates to maps and sketches of the mounds to the original photos and maps and sketches of the Mound 72 excavations. So a pretty fantastic resource, and really important that those are well cared for and made accessible to researchers. We've also got Melvin Fowler's personal archives. When Melvin Fowler passed away, his children were not interested in taking any of the stuff from his office, so we have all his stuff, including those 3 hats. I cannot say that those are Melvin Fowler's hats for certain, but I'm sure that at least 2 of them are. And I have 2 more that are probably his also. So I brought the 3 best hats down here. So we're curating all of Melvin Fowler's hats. We got the pith helmet, we got the large brim hat, and then if you haven't taken a close look yet, you need to look at the one with the solar panel and the fan, which is the one in the middle. No, it doesn't work. I know, because I'm pretty sure one of my interns put new batteries in there, because when I went to check the batteries to see if it would work, there were new batteries in there. So no, it does not work. Please nobody else try, because I can't believe somebody tried to begin with, although I was probably going to do it myself. So a lot of hypocritical things going on here. So the Fowler personal archives include a lot of personal slides in addition to research slides. We have all of these 9-track tapes. Some of these are his personally, I think, his particular research data. Some of them are department data. I'll talk about that a little bit more as I talk about the ongoing projects. And then we've also got things like this reconstructed sort of pot, the hat, a bunch of photos and slides. So how do you decide what to do with that? I was really saved by having several interns from the library science and the archives program here who could give me a better idea of how things should be curated, what sort of methods we should use, and how we should document them, because dealing with paper things is not something archaeologists are taught. So that was really a great resource here, and one that we're continuing to build that relationship with the Information Sciences Department. So in addition to that, we've got Neil Tappan's personal archives. We have some, I don't have them listed here, of William McHugh's personal archives as well. We've got Aztalan excavation paperwork, the UWM Field School paperwork, neither of which I have not convinced Dr. Richards or Dr. Jeske to allow me to put them in the archives, which is probably best because I don't have a lot of room anyway, but eventually they'll go in there once they're not active research programs anymore. The Archaeological Rescue Archives, which is projects that were undertaken with a lot of working with the public in the 1980s. I'll talk about that a little more later. So really a huge variety of stuff. So going through the archives and organizing them, you know, we found a lot of cool stuff. And I wanted to highlight for you guys some of the cool stuff that we found, because that's the best part of working on this, is you find all of these unexpected things, like the hats, and things that you wouldn't otherwise get to see because you're just not looking for them. So Melvin Fowler's Cahokia Archives, personally for me, were probably some of the most impressive things that we got to look at. And we have 12 filing cabinet drawers full of Cahokia archives. And now those are all documented. In addition, we've got several oversized items and a lot of maps that go with those Cahokia collections. So most of what I'll just show you guys some photos, but keep in mind that the photos are really only a small part of the collection, and there's a lot of paper documentation that goes along with it as well. So we've got the original photos that we often see published of the Mound 72 burials, right? Many of us have probably seen the published versions of these. We have the prints, maybe some of the film that goes along with those. You know, looking at those photos never really gets old. And yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? So, you know, many of us have seen those and they're still really cool every time you see them. But what's really neat is then we also get lots of photos of people actually working on the sites, many of which are not published. And both close-ups and more large-scale photographs. Then we've even got some color photos of people working in progress, and actually getting to see people as they're uncovering the Mound 72 burials. I have to say, looking at the state of the dirt as they were uncovering it, I can't imagine how they were doing that. It must have taken forever. It looks really crumbly and dry. So really a great opportunity to see what this project looked like as it was unfolding in the 1960s. So Fowler's archives just have a wealth of material in there for researchers to utilize. I also mentioned the Archaeological Rescue Archives earlier, and this is a pretty cool thing because it happened a little more recently. The 1980s are when most of these photographs are from, and a lot of these are from outreach at the Henschel site. And we've got some people that many of us might know in here as well. So the Greibush brothers, a couple of avocational archaeologists, are doing a flint knapping demonstration there. They're both still active in the archaeological community. Many of you know Dave Overstreet. That's Dave Overstreet excavating at the Henschel site. I probably should have downsized these photos before I put them in there. To be fair, Rob did tell me to do that, and I was like, no, I don't have time. So we don't see a lot of the outreach projects that were going on in archaeology at this time period. So we've got the opportunity to see what people were doing for outreach and how they were engaging with the public, and what was going on at the Henschel site excavations in particular, which the records for sort of spread all over the place. So the documentation that we have from that's really useful. The map collections See, now it just jumps ahead. The map collections we found, I'll highlight just a couple things. We have collector plots. So we have all these quad maps where anyone who talked to collectors would note where they got their materials from and then plot them on the map. I, of course, chose Jefferson County because it was the most populous one. And so that's why you see so many different sites marked on here. But so we have multiple quad maps from throughout the state where archaeologists went around and documented where private collections had come from. So, and then noted who the collector was. So that's something that it contains a large amount of archaeological knowledge that's not accessible to a lot of the academic community. We've got the original maps from the Cahokia Woodhenge excavations, which are pretty cool. Also very large files. Go. They look great. Thank you. The Mound 72 maps, probably almost as difficult to sketch as it was to excavate. And a lot of maps from different excavations at Aztalan. So we've had a lot of excavations at Aztalan over the years, and we have multiple generations of those maps that are stored in our collections. Some of those went with Lynn Goldstein to Michigan State when she went there, but it's really useful to us to have these giant files of Aztalan maps that you guys will never be able to see. There they are. Mapping all of the human remains at Aztalan. These are all Mylar maps. So some of our maps are paper. They're in real bad shape. A lot of those Cahokia maps are, and we need to work on preserving those. Anyone has a map scanner laying around, I'd really like to have it. So we can digitize these because they're in desperate need of it. So the archives was just one project, the big project that we've been working on over the last year that I wanted to talk about. The other one has been rehousing these legacy collections, and we've just started on dealing with our reference collections. So I'll just touch on those briefly. Rehousing has just meant rebagging or reboxing things, inventorying them, so we're sure that what's written on the box actually represents what is in the box, and then accessioning them into past perfect so that they're trackable. So one of the things that we recently looked at, I have somebody, I just had her start working on this last week, so we just found this last week, and she was going through a bunch of surface collected material that Jimmy Clark had donated to us from his surface collection around Lake Winnebago in the 1970s. And the reason these haven't been dealt with is because there's material from about 30 to 40 different archaeological sites in one box. And Past Perfect only lets you have one site per object record. So as a result, we need to accession all of the bags from this box so we can track them. So Tasha was going through and she's finding all of this neat stuff. So we've got a lot of ceramics and lithics, pretty common surface collected material, although there's some pretty cool pieces in there. Also giant files. I will never not listen to you again about the giant files. Yeah, just about the files. There's a caveat there. I threw this in there for you, Alex, so we get some historic material. Sorry, there's a bunch of rocks next to it. And what was unexpected was we found most of a human skull. And this is why you have to re-inventory your collections even after the initial NAGPRA inventory, because we didn't know we had this one. So the label just said plowed up. So it was plowed up somewhere, obviously, given the state that it's in. There were a couple materials found with it. We had some ceramic rims and a bifacial knife. Jimmy had written Oniota. He thought they were Oniota, and I would concur based on the material culture, assuming it was associated with the plowed up skull. The material culture also said plowed up on it, so it seems possible at least. So now at least we're able to curate this properly and put it with the rest of the human remains in the multi-site collections and keep the artifacts separate, which is something that we're working hard to do, is treat the human remains as part of really a mausoleum downstairs, and the artifacts as a really separate collection. So sometimes you have no idea what you'll find in these boxes. Kind of freaked her out. So first day on the job, find a human skull in a box. You never know what you'll find down there. So the other thing that we just started working on, and I've been waiting to start on this forever because it bothers me every time I walk past it, which is every day, and this is our reference collection. And it looks sort of organized because there are drawers, but it's a lie. There's no organization. The things that are in those drawers make no sense at all. And so we've got all of these drawers full of really cool lithic and mostly ceramic lithic reference collections that people can use, teaching collections, and they're just not systematized in any way. But they're really neat stuff. So you've got drawers full of rims, drawers full of projectile points, which incidentally are part of Sarah Fancook, who we were talking about earlier. Her dissertation, it took her forever to find those and figure out that that's where they were located so she could put them in her dissertation. We've got entire pots that have been reconstructed, and then a just sort of array of objects in this drawer. Just to highlight what's in this drawer specifically, we've got some really sweet projectile points that you don't find every day, and they're giant. Every time I click it, your scanner scans at like 600 DPI. That's not necessary. We've got a Bison Horn with a metal projectile point in it. Kind of cool. So people should probably be able to see that. We've got a grooved axe. And then we've got a lot of ceramics that are obviously not from around here. Who knows where we got them from? But maybe we can find out. I don't know. So that's what we're trying to do with the reference collections, is make them something we can actually reference instead of a sort of puzzle that's unsolvable, so that people actually want to use the things that are in there and don't just walk past them hurriedly, so that they don't have to think about what's in there, so that we can find things when we want to use them. So as it sounds, we have a lot of things that are in progress, right? It's not all done, shockingly, and that's why I'm more glad than horrified that I have 20 interns this semester. One of the big things is floatation. It's too bad Hannah left because she's in this picture. So I wish I could say that this pictured most of our float samples. That would be not true. So all of those garbage bags are filled with soil samples that need to be run through our float tanks. Hundreds is a slight understatement. So they're taking up a lot of space, and we had to move them when that room flooded. We had to move them several times before that. I can count people in this room that have moved them on multiple different occasions. Many of them are from 2014, some are just from 2017, so they haven't been here more than a couple months. But they, like their predecessors, will continue to sit there if we don't do something about them. So the floatation samples are getting done, even if we have to climb on the mountains of them to get to them. One of the things that's taking up a lot of space in archives right now are these code sheets. Doesn't that look exciting to read? And there are conservatively about 30 boxes of them, banker's size boxes of code sheets, and we don't know what they are. They're from the 1970s for the most part, and we think that the data that's printed on these code sheets is recorded on these 9-track tapes. So I was very excited at this possibility because I really want to get rid of these code sheets because they're taking up a ton of space and they're not very usable in their current state. They're binary data. And so I thought, well, maybe we have them digitally. So we got this data translated to something that we could sort of read on our modern computers. It's at least visible to us now, if not readable. And I actually had someone volunteer to try to match them up. Megan's like, not me. So we've spent some time trying to puzzle that out, and we actually think we may have been able to match some of the tapes to the boxes. Now we have to match the data on the computer to the tapes. This was just kind of going in circles. But my hope is to either A, be able to figure out what we have on the tapes and magically it is what is on those sheets and I can throw out the sheets, or B, convince Dr. Richards that we'll never figure out how to match them and we can throw out the sheets. So it's really the same goal either way. One would be better, but the code sheets are an ongoing project that really has to be dealt with. Those were taking up a ton of space in artifact storage. So now they're just on the floor in the archives room, which used to look nice and clean. So that's the main reason they got to go. The barcode labels is something that we've been starting to work on for quite some time, and we're working on getting that implemented this fall, where we're going to have barcoded boxes and all of our locations will be barcoded. So when you move a box to a particular location, all you got to do is scan the box, then scan the location, and PastPerfect will magically update. So that's hopefully going to make things a lot simpler for tracking purposes, a lot less human error involved. The ARL research library that I mentioned earlier, as you can see, is just stacks of books on shelves. We've got a lot of really great reference materials in there, both published and unpublished. I recently removed all of the published periodicals and journals and the unpublished dissertations out of there, and those are actually organized on shelves elsewhere, but the library remains thus. So somebody's working on that right now and is going to organize those topically and then by author so that they're searchable, and then we'll eventually get those in PastPerfect as well. All of those project archives that I mentioned that are in about 40 filing cabinets worth of CRM archives now all need to be accessioned into PastPerfect so that we can not only find them but track them as well. In case someone wants to take a project folder to their desk and needs to work on it, you can enter that into PastPerfect and you have a place you can record it. So that's just some highlights of stuff that we're working on, and it's really working towards the goal of having accessible collections. A lot of the argument, if you talk to private collectors of artifacts, they'll tell you that the things that we collect as archaeologists are not any more accessible than the stuff in their basement. And after having gone through our stuff, I would have to say they're correct. There was no rhyme or reason to how things were recorded here, and people who have been here for decades could not have told you where this stuff was. Dr. John Richards has an incredible memory, and he knows the stuff's here, but even he can't tell you where it was, okay? So I feel like there's a lot of truth to that, and if we want that argument to be moot, then we need to work towards that. So making these collections accessible, not just to other researchers, but to the public as well, is something that I'm really hoping that this can get us towards. And that's part of the reason that we set up the archives as it is, with workstations up there so that we can have researchers actually come and work in the archives. And then leading into that, eventually what we'd like to do is get our database online. So the Rock Pile Museum, way more interesting than it sounds, I'm sure, is an example of this. And there's, sorry, Rob, I'm sure it's very interesting. The Rock Pile Museum is just one of hundreds of institutions that utilizes Past Perfect Online. And Past Perfect Online, you pay a hosting fee, and then you're able to host all or a portion of your database online, and people can actually search your database and see if the materials that they're looking for are there. So obviously, there are parts of our collection that we wouldn't want to be visible and accessible to everybody, so we could delegate or relegate certain things to the non-online database, but this will make it something that people can actually search and see what the heck we have here. And they don't even have to be in the building to do it. They don't have to go box to box to look for all of our stuff. I had somebody ask me if they could look at, many of you will probably know who this is, all of the bison remains that we have here. I don't know what bison remains we have here. I don't think anybody knows what bison remains we have here. I'll bet we have lots of bison remains. I couldn't tell you where they are. There you go, yeah, there's some in that Jimmy Clark box. We got that horn sitting around. Who knows where that's from? So that shouldn't be the way that things are. And we've made a ton of progress towards dealing with that situation. But it's going to take, I think, a concerted effort and a lack of loss of momentum to keep that going. So that's what I'm trying to do. That's all. Thanks.
All right, so if there's any questions for Kat, fire away.
Tried to keep it